Hello. So today I want to talk a little bit about how do you even get into voiceover in 2025? Because it's a bit of a different scenario today to how it was when I started. Now, I started 15 years ago, and this was when the pay-to-play starts were just starting up. The sort of legacy industry was essentially still there. A lot of work through agents and managers was still a big part of the industry, which it still is today, but is certainly diminished from where it once was. So where do we stand today? Now, it's a complicated thing to discuss because it really depends a lot on the kind of voiceover that you want to do, the different genres that you want to work in, where you're based, your experience level, the demographic of who you are. All of these things factor in, including like how much time you get to devote to this. Do you have some money to be able to throw at this in order to develop your career? So it's not an easy answer to the question, and there are quite a few sources out there which claim that there is an easy answer to this question, and immediately that should make you a little dubious because it is not easy to answer. Everyone's situation is completely unique, and the path that they want to take is unique, and the path that the industry determines for them is going to be unique, based on all those things that I just described, and that's aside from your actual voice. So lots of factors go into it. Now, the big thing that has been the sort of headline of the past few years has, of course, been AI and that's influence on the industry, and that is still being rolled out. That is still affecting the industry in different ways, and we're sort of seeing the long-term effects of that, having been introduced a couple of years ago, start to play out. So, this could all change. We are noticing change for sure, and it's important to consider that also. Now, where do you begin if you wanted to start today? Well, I think watching videos like this, reading books, listening to podcasts, there's a lot of free information out there that you can start the journey with. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. This is one of those things that is going to take a while for you to figure out. It's not rocket science. You're not training to be a doctor, of course. It's not like deep knowledge that's, or complicated things that are particularly important to learn to do the work. However, there is a lot of it because all the different genres of voiceover have sort of different aspects to them. Not necessarily rules per se, but they operate somewhat differently from one another. So the animation world in LA operates quite differently from the corporate narration world from wherever you are, So all of these different genres have different aspects to them that make them, their own sort of unique kind of, challenge to overcome. Now, one of the big things is figuring out, well, where do I fit? You might have ambitions of, what do I want to do? Which is great. That's a good starting point. But really, what is the industry going to determine your path is going to be? Because what you want to do and what you will end up doing might not necessarily be the same thing, There aren't many people who can't find some little corner of this industry to operate in. There's a lot of call for niche voices or voices of a certain demographic that may get you some work if you fulfill that requirement. But will that be enough to sustain your career? Will that be more than 2 or 3 jobs a year? I don't know. Are you going to be able to get to those people who want to book you for those jobs? Or do you have mass appeal, but because you're a little more, let's say, generic in not a derogatory way, but you have much more general appeal, you're going to have a lot of competition, so that also determines your path a little bit. So the first stage of your career is figuring out, who am I as a talent? What do I have to offer? What do I enjoy doing? What do I get positive feedback from the world? And where should I put all my efforts in terms of exploiting that and encouraging opportunities there for work? And that's easier said than done. You can go to coaching, you can take workshops, and, you can get feedback from auditions and all this kind of stuff. And that all goes into the pot to figure out, who am I as a talent? And then, of course, you have to use your own sort of creative brain to then determine, right, I'm taking all of this information. What is good information? What is bad information? What is relevant? What is irrelevant? And then try and filter that in a way that makes sense. Now, having coaches, wonderful, that's great, but every coach has their own sort of perspective on it that is somewhat unique. So again, you can't necessarily rely on a single mentor to guide you through this process because they are influenced by their own experience. And that's assuming they do have experience. There are a lot of people out there claiming to be coaches and mentors who don't have a lot of experience but are trying to cash in on the coaching game because they're not booking much voiceover work. So you have to be very careful of that side too, whether they're selling courses or video courses or workshops or even demo production, website developing. There's a whole cottage industry in voiceover that just makes money from people who want to do voiceover. So you have to be very careful about avoiding those pitfalls too. So it's a lot. But the main thing I think is that gathering information is your starting point, and knowing that this isn't going to be a quick fix. So if you've just been made redundant, if you're desperate to do this thing now because you think you can fill a financial hole by doing voiceover work, I think it's time to reassess that approach. If you're deeply passionate about it and want to throw yourself in, but you're not in a financial position to do that, well, maybe step one is to get yourself in that financial position. Build yourself up a little buffer of cash if you can, so that you can devote some time, or maybe shift some hours at work to be able to spend time that isn't when you're not totally drained. Or if you can't do either of those things, is to go, well, maybe I have to allocate a bit more time in the evening, maybe a little less Netflix and a little more practice of voiceover. It's difficult. Maybe you've got kids, maybe you've got an elderly parent that you're looking after. Maybe you're dealing with health issues. It's tough, I know, but it's a big barrier to get over to get into this industry because, of course, it's wonderful when you're in, and it is, difficult to get in because of that, because who doesn't want to be essentially paid to use their voice and to create characters and to act and to do this really fulfilling, exciting stuff. But because it's so good, a lot of people want to do it, and therefore there's a big barrier to entry. So it makes perfect sense, and everyone kind of fundamentally knows this, of course. I would advise, be creative with the situation that you have and try and get your expectations in line with your reality. And that may be a tough pill to chew on early on, but you want to deal in reality. You want to know the truth of the situation, right? You don't want to deal in hopes and dreams and kind of fantasies. You want to deal in the reality so that you can take the core of your reality and day by day turn that into the direction that you want it to aim at. There are very few overnight successes in voiceover. It is a very, very difficult industry to break into. I hate that term, breaking into it, because if it is a breaking in, it's the slowest breaking in. It's a brick by brick deconstruction of the building to get into that building. So it's slow, somewhat painful. You might go down certain alleyways and they might be dead ends, and then you might have to reverse back out again and try another path. I want to set you up for success by making your expectations as realistic as possible. So what do? Like I say, become a learning sponge. Learn the objective reality of the industry by reading books, listening to podcasts, taking workshops, taking classes, like I say. And then you also need to learn the subjective reality of the industry, as in, how do I partake in it? And what do I have to offer that other people are willing to pay for? Maybe it is characterization. Maybe it is an ability to read medical narration really effectively and convincingly and not sound awkward and stiff. Maybe it's video games. Maybe it's you got a really great promotional voice. Maybe you sound really down to earth and relatable, and maybe that works in the commercial world. Maybe you've got a really old school announcery kind of voice that might not be in vogue for all work, but there is still, the requirement for those kind of old school voices in certain areas. Maybe that's your thing. Who knows? Maybe you're a mum. Maybe you have kids, and that means you're really tuned into what kids are into right now. And so maybe toys or animation for kids is your whatever it is. It's going to take you a while to figure out, can I do that in a way that is really competitive? And, desire is one thing, reality is another. I had high expectations for certain things coming in, and they didn't really pan out like that. I got, close to it, similar things, but, you have to sort of go with the flow a little bit. Now, the whole AI thing is throwing everyone for a bit of a loop. I think we're starting to get some level of equilibrium here. It's not a complete decimation of the industry now AI has come along, but it has had a significant effect. So a lot of the work that you might have cut your teeth on, maybe if you started 10 or 15 years ago, like when I did, and there was relatively low pressure, but you could still get a bit of money to help you fund yourself. I think a lot of that work has now gone away to AI because it can do the job good enough. Like you or I would have done the job good enough 10 or 15 years ago. AI can now do it, but really cheap or even free. So, of course, working your way in is tougher. Okay, so that's the reality of today. So what do we do with that? Well, we have to get really good on our own and be able to fund that one way or another through coaching and workshops and conferences and using your voice and attending things and creating social groups where you can play things off each other and maybe do some work for free early on that's creatively fulfilling and gets your resume. No, all of those things that take time and or money. That has to be figured out one way or another, whether that is through cheap voiceover work or whether that is, getting a, raise at your work or maybe changing jobs or, I don't know your situation, so I can't say what that path is. That's where, it has to be more, focused. So, there's the broad, I'm covering an awful lot of stuff here in a very short period of time. Sorry to rush through this, but there's the broad general knowledge and then there's the real specific knowledge. And your job is to sort of curate all of that stuff for yourself, synthesize it, and then try with the help of other people and carve your path, building into that a sense of, well, if that doesn't work out, we pivot and we go over here. Oh, that didn't quite work out. Let's make a little readjustment and we'll move forward this way. All the while, hopefully getting a little bit better over time and learning yourself and learning the industry as a whole as you do so. So I covered an awful lot there. It was a little bit of a rambling conversation here because I didn't write any notes. I didn't really know what I was even going to say before I started, in terms of how to sort of break in, which is such an awful expression. I'll probably use it in the title because that's the expression of choice for these days. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. We'll see. Let me know if it was, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.